Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about airspace boundaries and drone flying regulations using Sydney Harbour area as an example. Let's consider the areas northeast of Sydney Airport and south of Sydney Harbour. What you can see is a section of the Visual Terminal Chart, or VTC, an aeronautical chart used by pilots and air service navigation providers. VTCs are designed for visual operations near terminal areas. They contain some topographical detail and appropriate airspace, radio communication, and navigation aid information. VTC would be a useful chart when planning for a drone activity. However, as you can see, VTC contains a lot of information that is at times difficult to decipher without training and study. So in this presentation, we have selected the airspace information most useful for illustrating drone flying regulations. This is Sydney Opera House, which is located 10 kilometers from Sydney Airport, 2 kilometers from Sydney CBD, and 7 kilometers from Bondi Beach. University of New South Wales, or UNSW, is located here. For safety, this airspace, shaded in blue, exists to ensure control of all aircraft movements by the air traffic controllers. As a manned aircraft, to enter this airspace, which applies from surface to 2,500 feet, the pilot needs clearance from the air traffic controllers at the Sydney Airport Tower. The Sydney Harbour area is outside the designated takeoff and landing path of Sydney Airport. This is shown in red. As you can see, the landing and takeoff path run north-south and east-west. Sydney Harbour is also outside the 3 nautical mile or 5.5 kilometer range of the airport movement area. This is shown by the racetrack-shaped light blue boundary. Sydney Harbour is enveloped by a restricted airspace area called RA405A, which applies from surface to 500 feet. This is highlighted in pink. Another restricted area is RA405B, which applies from surface to 1,000 feet, highlighted in orange. This shows the cross-section of the two restricted areas. You can see that RA405B, highlighted in orange, applies up to 1,000 feet, whereas RA405A applies up to 500 feet. Restricted area means aircraft requires permission from the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, or otherwise known by its acronym CASA, to enter those airspaces. This restriction applies to drones even for very small class of airborne drones, defined by CASA as those weighing between more than 250 grams and 2 kilograms. Very small drones include those quadcopters you often see in electronic shops. Even within a restricted airspace, it is possible to fly a drone. However, CASA approval is required to fly that drone. In the case of Sydney Harbour and the surrounding areas, the approval requires the drone operator to have at least a remote pilot license, or RAPL. With a remote pilot license, permission can be sought from CASA to operate within Sydney Harbour's restricted area. Therefore, as an example, a drone cannot be flown without permission at Fort Denison because Fort Denison is located within RA405B. Even in areas outside the RA405A and RA405B, drone operations can be restricted near Sydney Harbour. For example, permission is required from the Royal Botanical Gardens Trust to fly a drone from the Botanic Gardens or the Domain, even if they are located outside the restricted airspace. Let's apply this learning to Bondi Beach. As you can see, Bondi Beach is outside the restricted airspace RA405. It is also outside the takeoff and landing path of Sydney Airport. It is also outside the 5.5 kilometer range from the movement area of the Sydney Aerodrome. According to CASA, if the drone is flown for fun, the drone operator does not require special approval as long as the drone is flown under the Standard Operating Condition. Standard Operating Conditions, or SOCs, may not easily apply at Bondi Beach because one of the rules is to avoid flying over or above people or in a populous area. Also, under SOCs, it is not permitted to fly within 30 meters of people. Even if all SOCs were met, there are additional rules and restrictions enforced by the local government. Therefore, Permission should be sought in this case from the Waverley City Council. How about another question? Can I fly a very small drone in the outdoor areas of UNSW Kensington campus? UNSW is located here. It is located within the 5.5 km of Sydney Airport's movement area, that is the racetrack-shaped light blue boundary. The takeoff and landing path, shown by the red cross, lies above the majority of UNSW campus. That is, UNSW Kensington campus is located below the takeoff and landing path as well as the 5.5 km of Sydney Airport's movement area. In addition, there are other important airspaces the drone operator has to be aware of. This includes active helipads located in the nearby army barracks and hospitals. In summary, to the general public, UNSW campus is a no-fly zone due to the proximity to Sydney Airport and its location in relation to the takeoff and landing path. Under certain circumstances, application can be made to operate within the campus. This application is subject to UNSW's Chief Remote Pilot and CAS's approval. In conclusion, basic aeronautical literacy aids safe and efficient drone operations even when you are flying a drone for fun. For more information about the safe and legal drone flying, go to casa.gov.au.